Do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? The chandeliers sparkled. The guests clinked glasses. The band played a lively tune. He was about to say, "I do," to his new, wealthy mistress, grinning like he owned the world. But then the doors burst open. Two small figures dashed down the aisle, shouting at the top of their lungs, "That's our father. Mom's at the hospital." The guests froze. The bride's smile faltered. His face turned pale. Nobody expected this chaos, especially him. What do you think happened next? Hello, family, and welcome back. Before we begin, I have a small but heartfelt request. Please subscribe. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Every time you click that button, you're helping us share voices that would otherwise be forgotten and stories that deserve to be heard. And in the comments, tell us where you're watching from. Because together we are not just telling stories. We are keeping hope alive. The chandeliers sparkled like frozen stars, their light dancing across the room. Laughter floated through the grand ballroom, bouncing off the marble walls and gold-lined mirrors. Every seat was filled with money, gossip, and the heavy scent of expensive perfume. The guests wore diamonds heavy enough to break a neck and smiles fake enough to fool even the most discerning cameras. At the front of the hall, under a towering white arch of roses, Richard Hale stood, handsome, confident, and painfully aware of the cameras flashing all around him. To everyone watching, he was a man who had rebuilt his life after a terrible tragedy, a man who had miraculously found happiness again. But if anyone had looked closer, really looked, they would have seen the tremor in his fingers and the sweat beading at the back of his neck, because this wasn't happiness. This was a meticulously crafted performance. And deep down, Richard knew it. But he didn't mind. Not one bit. Clara Whitmore stood across from him in her diamond-studded gown, every inch of her screaming wealth and control. Her smile was wide, elegant, and cold. She didn't just walk into a room. She owned it. And today she was about to own him body and soul. She reached out, touching Richard's cheek gently for the benefit of the photographers. "Smile, darling," she whispered through perfectly aligned teeth. "You look guilty." Richard forced a smile, but his eyes betrayed him. He glanced over the crowd, taking in the scene. Hundreds of people, powerful families, business partners, politicians, every single one of them watching, every single one of them believing the same carefully constructed story, that Richard's wife, Evelyn, had tragically died in a car accident 6 months ago, and that he was now moving forward, finally and nobly, with Clara, the wonderful woman who had selflessly helped him through the darkest period of his life. It was a fairy tale for the newspapers, a carefully crafted lie for everyone else, because Evelyn Hale wasn't dead. She was lying in a hospital bed, fighting for her life, and Richard hadn't visited her even once. The music began again, soft, romantic, and meticulously rehearsed. Clara tilted her head, basking in the attention like a cat in the sun. Her maid of honor whispered something in her ear, and Clara's smirk deepened. She didn't care about love. She cared about power. And this wedding was her victory parade. She'd waited years for this moment, biding her time. She'd watched Richard climb from nothing, using her money, her connections, her subtle manipulation. And now she was finally sealing the deal. Not just marriage, but complete and utter control. She leaned toward him again, her voice a low murmur. "Remember what I told you?" she murmured. No tears, no mention of her. "Today it's just us." Richard nodded stiffly. "I know." "Good," she said, squeezing his hand hard enough to actually hurt. "Then let's give them a show they won't soon forget." Outside the Grand Hotel, under a row of parked luxury cars, two small figures crouched behind a massive marble pillar. Liam and Leah Hale, 10 years old. They were identical twins, but they certainly didn't look identical today. Liam's face was streaked with dirt and tears. Leah's small fists were clenched so tight her fingernails dug painfully into her palms. They'd run here barefoot, slipping away from their aunt's car when she stopped for gas. They didn't know exactly what they would do. They just knew one thing. Their dad was marrying another woman, and their mom was still alive. Leah peeked around the pillar, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and determination. "That's him?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "That's Dad." Liam's jaw trembled, and more tears welled up in his eyes. "Why is he smiling like that?" he asked, his voice cracking with emotion. "Doesn't he know Mom's still sick?" Her voice broke completely on the last word. "He knows." They'd overheard their aunt on the phone. Her voice hushed but clear. They'd heard every cruel word Clara's friend had said about their mother. "Poor Evelyn," she'd said with a dismissive sigh. "Maybe it's better she doesn't wake up." Can you imagine the embarrassment? That was when something inside them snapped. That was when they knew they had to do something, anything. Leia wiped her face with the back of her hand, smearing the dirt even further. "We have to tell them," she said, her voice firm despite the tears. "Tell who?" Liam asked, confused. "Everyone." And before he could even attempt to stop her, she bolted toward the doors. Inside, the ceremony was reaching its peak. The minister cleared his throat, his voice booming through the microphone. "Do you, Richard Hale, take Clara Whitmore?" The words were abruptly sliced in half by the sound of crashing doors. Two small figures burst into the hall, their voices cutting through the music like a knife through butter. "That's our father," Leia shouted, her voice high-pitched and breaking with emotion. "Mom's at the hospital," Liam added, breathless and panicked. The entire room froze. Every head turned. Every camera swiveled. Richard's world tilted on its axis. For a split second, he thought he was dreaming, hallucinating. The twins stood at the back of the aisle, shaking, staring straight at him with an intensity that pierced his carefully constructed facade. "Dad," Liam cried, his voice full of pain and confusion. "Why are you doing this?" Gasps rippled through the hall like thunder. Whispers rose from every corner of the room. Cameras clicked furiously, capturing every agonizing moment. "Our father. Mom's alive. What's going on?" The band stopped playing mid-note, the silence amplifying the chaos. Richard's throat closed, making it difficult to breathe. "Liam." "Leia," he stammered, taking a tentative step forward instinctively. But Clara's hand shot out, striking him sharply across the face, the force of the blow stinging his cheek. She then grabbed his wrist in a grip that felt like a vice. Her face was still smiling sweetly for the cameras, but her eyes were now full of venom. She leaned toward him, her voice a menacing hiss. "You promised me they wouldn't be here." He swallowed hard, his mouth suddenly dry. I didn't know. They. "Fix it," she whispered, her lips barely moving. "Now." The twins ran forward down the aisle, dodging stunned guests who were too shocked to react. Leia clutched a crumpled hospital wristband in her hand, waving it frantically. "Dad," she shouted again, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Mom woke up," the nurse said. "Enough." Clara's voice rang out, sharp and echoing across the hall, effectively silencing Leia. The twins froze, their small bodies trembling. Every guest turned toward the bride, stunned at her sudden and uncharacteristic outburst. Clara's smile returned, perfectly controlled, impeccably polished, and utterly terrifying. "Oh, how sweet," she said, her voice dripping honey over pure poison. "Children often struggle to move on after a loss." She looked directly at the guests, pointedly avoiding eye contact with the twins. "Poor things. Their mother's passing was very hard on them." Leia blinked, confused by Clara's words. "Mom's not." But before she could finish her sentence and reveal the truth, a security guard appeared seemingly out of nowhere behind them. "Get them out," Clara said quietly, her voice dangerously calm. "Wait," Richard's voice cracked, a desperate plea escaping his lips. "They're just." She turned to him sharply, her eyes flashing with fury. "Not a word." The guards stepped forward, their presence intimidating. Leia screamed, trying to pull away as one of them grabbed her arm, his grip surprisingly firm. "Daddy," she cried, her voice echoing through the hall. "Please don't let them take us." Richard's chest heaved. His legs twitched as if wanting to move forward, but he didn't move. He didn't say a word, because Clara was watching him, and every single camera in the room was documenting his inaction. The crowd stared in shock as the twins were unceremoniously dragged out of the ballroom, their cries fading into the distance. Guests murmured amongst themselves, phones rising to record the unfolding chaos. One woman whispered, "My God, are those really his kids?" Another said, "What a scandal." Clara smoothed her gown, her smile returning as if nothing had happened. "Children," she said softly, almost sweetly, "they don't always understand when adults fall in love again." And just like that, she turned back to the minister, dismissing the entire scene as a childish outburst. "Please," she said, "continue." Richard stood frozen, his body rigid with fear and indecision. The minister hesitated, glancing nervously at Clara. The guests whispered louder, but Clara's unwavering expression made it perfectly clear. The show would go on, regardless of the collateral damage. She stepped closer to Richard, her voice low and venomous, audible only to him. "You listen to me," she said through gritted teeth. "You don't look at that door. You don't speak their names. You stand here, you smile, and you finish what you started." He stared at her, at the woman who held his entire life precariously in her grasp, and said nothing. He was trapped, completely and utterly trapped. The minister cleared his throat again, pretending nothing had happened. "Do you, Richard Hale?" Richard couldn't hear the rest of the words. His mind was back at the door, replaying the scene over and over. He could still hear Leia crying, still see Liam's small, tear-streaked face, confused, betrayed. "Mom's at the hospital." The words echoed in his head, relentless and unforgiving. He felt the room spinning, the faces blurring around him. He reached for his phone, fumbling in his pocket, needing to check, needing to know if it was true, needing some kind of confirmation that his world hadn't completely shattered. And then he saw it, a single notification illuminated on his screen. One new message from St. Luke's Hospital. He unlocked the phone under the table, trying desperately to be discreet. The message read, "Patient Evelyn Hale, condition improving, requesting next of kin." His heart stopped beating for what felt like an eternity. He looked up, his eyes darting around the room. Clara was smiling at the crowd, waving to a cameraman, glowing under the bright lights. He felt sick, the weight of his actions crushing him. The minister's voice sounded distant now, like a radio playing softly in another room. "Do you, Clara Whitmore?" Richard's hands were trembling uncontrollably. He slipped the phone back into his pocket, his mind racing. He knew he should leave. He knew he should go to the hospital, be by Evelyn's side. He knew without a doubt what the right thing to do was. But then he looked at Clara, at the woman who could destroy him with a single phone call, and he stayed still. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stood there, a man trapped by his own choices, bound by the chains of his ambition. And when the minister finally said, "You may now kiss the bride," Richard did, because everyone was watching, and Richard Hale had always been far better at pretending than confessing. The doors slammed shut behind the twins, the heavy sound echoing down the marble hallway like a clap of thunder. Leia stumbled as the guard pushed her forward, his hand firm on her back. Liam tried to pull her back, shouting, "Don't touch her! Calm down, kids!" The guard grumbled, his voice not unkindly, but clearly tired. "You can't interrupt a wedding like that." "It's not a wedding," Leia cried, her voice full of righteous anger. "He's already married. That's our dad. Our mom's in the hospital." The man sighed, his face softening slightly. "Look, I just follow orders." "Orders from her?" Liam asked, glaring toward the closed ballroom doors. "The woman in white?" The guard hesitated, glancing at the doors before quickly looking away. "Go home, kid," he said, his voice weary. He waved for another security staffer, and the twins were unceremoniously led outside, pushed through the glittering lobby full of guests who were pretending not to stare, their faces a mixture of curiosity and judgment. People whispered behind raised champagne glasses. A few brazenly took photos, their flashes momentarily blinding. Someone muttered, "Unbelievable. He has children." Leia's face burned with shame, the heat rising from her chest. Liam clenched his fists until his knuckles went white. His small body tense with anger. They were small, too small for this kind of adult world, too vulnerable to the harsh realities they were now facing. But even children can sense cruelty when it's aimed directly at them, and they felt it keenly. Outside, the sunlight was harsh and unforgiving, amplifying their sense of abandonment. The faint sound of laughter and violins still drifted from inside, a constant reminder of the celebration they had so dramatically disrupted. Leia sank onto the steps, wiping her face with her sleeve, leaving streaks of dirt and tears. "He didn't even say anything," she mumbled, her voice barely audible. Liam didn't answer, his gaze fixed on the huge glass doors, his chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. "He saw us," Liam said quietly, his voice flat and emotionless. "He looked right at us. And he didn't move." Leia sniffed, her lower lip trembling. Maybe he couldn't." He turned to her sharply, his eyes flashing with anger. "He could," he insisted. "He just didn't want to." The bitterness in his voice was unsettling, too grown up for a 10-year-old. Leia's lip trembled, and fresh tears welled up in her eyes. Why would he do that to Mom? He didn't answer because he didn't know. Because sometimes even children can tell when the truth is too ugly, too painful to speak aloud. Back inside, the wedding limped forward, a broken illusion held together by Clara Whitmore's sheer force of will and determination. Her face was the picture of calm, radiant, poised, every hair perfectly in place. But her hands were trembling slightly as she adjusted her veil, a subtle sign of her inner turmoil. The guests whispered, their voices hushed but filled with speculation. The atmosphere had irrevocably changed. She could feel their judgment, their curiosity, their thinly veiled disapproval. In her world, public humiliation was far worse than any crime, and Richard's children had just made her bleed in public. When the ceremony finally ended, she turned toward Richard, her smile frozen in place. She waited until the photographers had finished snapping their pictures before grabbing his wrist with surprising force and pulling him aside, her nails digging into his skin. "What the hell was that?" she hissed, her voice barely controlled. "I didn't know they'd come," he stammered, trying to defend himself. "You didn't know?" Her voice dropped to a sharp whisper, laced with barely suppressed rage. "You said your sister had them under control." "She did. They must have." "Don't." Her eyes were blazing now, the carefully constructed facade of composure completely shattered. "You had one job, Richard. One." He rubbed his wrist, trying to ease the pain from her grip. "They're kids, Clara. They—" She stepped closer, her perfume sharp and overwhelming, her voice cold and cutting. "They're your mistake. Don't ever let your mistake embarrass me again." He stared at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and resentment. "They're my children." Clara tilted her head, smiling faintly, but her eyes remained cold. "Not today they weren't." And with that, she turned and walked away, her expensive gown sweeping behind her like a blade, cutting a path through the stunned guests. At the back of the ballroom, the guests were buzzing like flies over fresh scandal, their whispers growing louder and more animated. "Did you see the little girl's face? She said her mom's alive." "Impossible. Didn't Evelyn die?" "Well, apparently not." Phones were out, messages were being typed furiously, and the story was already spreading like wildfire. A bridesmaid tried to approach Clara, stammering nervously. "Maybe we should pause the reception?" Clara didn't even look at her, her eyes fixed on the dance floor. "The show goes on." "But the children." "I said the show goes on." And it did. The band started up again, playing a lively tune, although the music sounded hollow and forced. The waiters moved like ghosts, efficiently clearing plates and refilling glasses, but their faces were grim. The guests forced nervous smiles, trying to pretend that everything was normal, but the fairy tale was cracked now, and everyone could feel it. The tension hung heavy in the air, an undercurrent of whispers and furtive glances. Clara danced, posed for photos, offered toasts, and laughed, but her smile never quite reached her eyes. Richard barely spoke, lost in his own thoughts and regrets. He sat at the head table, staring at his untouched drink, seeing flashes of the twins' faces in his mind, replaying the scene over and over. Leia crying, Liam shouting, "Dad, why are you doing this?" The words dug into him like knives, twisting and turning with each repetition. His phone buzzed again, another insistent message from St. Luke's Hospital. Patient Evelyn Hale is awake. Urgent. Attending physician requests immediate family presence. He felt his pulse spike, his heart pounding in his chest. He looked up, his eyes searching for Clara. She was laughing with a group of guests, pretending the world was perfect, oblivious to the turmoil raging inside him. He could feel the eyes of the guests on him, the cameras, the press, the weight of the deal, the money, the power, all of it threatening to suffocate him. He looked down at his phone again, his eyes drawn to the message on the screen. His thumb hovered over the screen, over the words, Evelyn Hale. Then slowly, deliberately, he turned the phone over and set it face down on the table, silencing the insistent buzzing. He picked up his glass, offered a weak smile for the next photographer, and pretended he didn't hear the ghost of his children's voices echoing in his head, a constant reminder of his betrayal. Across town in the quiet room of St. Luke's Hospital, machines beeped softly, their rhythmic sounds a constant presence. Evelyn Hale's eyes fluttered open, her vision blurry. The harsh ceiling lights swam into focus above her. Her throat was dry and scratchy, her body weak and unresponsive. But her mind was fighting through the fog, desperately trying to make sense of what was happening. She saw a nurse by her side, her face kind and reassuring. Then she saw her children running toward her, their small faces full of tears and relief, their eyes shining with an emotion she couldn't quite decipher. "Mom!" Leia cried, throwing herself onto the bed, her small arms wrapping around Evelyn's neck. Evelyn blinked, dazed and disoriented. "Leia? Liam?" "We came from the wedding," Liam said, his voice trembling with a mixture of anger and sadness. "Dad's marrying someone else." He said you?" Evelyn's heart twisted with a pain she hadn't felt before. "Wedding?" Leia nodded, sobbing uncontrollably. "She hit him. She told everyone you were dead." For a moment, Evelyn just stared at them, trying to process their words, trying to make sense of the impossible. Then the memories came rushing back, a torrent of images and sensations. The argument, the rain, the car, the sudden loss of control. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Where's your father?" Neither of the twins answered, their silence speaking volumes. Evelyn's lips parted again, her voice faint, but clear and unwavering. "Where's your father?" The question hung in the air, heavy, aching, and endless. The camera would fade out here, focusing on Evelyn's weak but burning eyes, her trembling hand gripping her children's hands tightly. A mother waking into a nightmare of betrayal, a husband pretending it didn't happen, a storm about to begin. If you haven't subscribed yet, we'd love for you to join our community by hitting the subscribe button. Through our stories, we build hope and give a future to children and women who have been abused all over the world. Motivate us by subscribing and turning on your notification bell so you never miss a story that matters. Also, let us know in the comments where you are watching from and how this story spoke to you. The rain hadn't stopped since the night Evelyn Hale woke up, its relentless rhythm mirroring the turmoil in her heart. It beat against the hospital windows like impatient fingers tapping out a warning, steady and cold. The sterile smell of antiseptic filled the air, a constant reminder of her confinement. Machines hummed softly beside her bed, their beeps and whirs a mechanical symphony of life and death. Evelyn stared blankly at the ceiling, still trying to piece together the fragmented memories, still struggling to understand how she had ended up here. The sharp turn on the wet road, Richard's angry face illuminated by the headlights, the terrifying sound of tires screeching, losing control, the sickening impact. Then nothing, just darkness. a vast and empty void. And then, finally, the light, the agonizing return to consciousness when she opened her eyes again. Her throat burned when she tried to speak, the muscles unused and atrophied. "Where?" she whispered, her voice raspy and weak, barely audible above the hum of the machines. "Where am I?" A nurse appeared quickly, her face etched with concern, offering a gentle and reassuring smile. "St. Luke's Hospital, Mrs. Hale. You've been here for 3 months." Evelyn blinked, her mind reeling. 3 months? "Yes, ma'am. You were in a coma, but you're safe now." Safe. That word didn't feel right, didn't resonate with the confusion and pain churning inside her. Not yet. She tried to move, but a searing pain shot through her chest, a sharp reminder of her injuries. Her arms trembled with the effort, her body weak and unresponsive. She felt fragile, vulnerable, like a ghost wearing her own skin. Then she saw them. 2 small faces pressed against the window of the room, their features distorted by the glass. Liam and Leia. Her heart lurched with a surge of love and longing. The nurse smiled again, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Your children have been waiting. Should I let them in?" Evelyn nodded weakly, tears welling up in her eyes. "Please." The twins rushed in, their sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. Leia climbed onto the bed carefully, mindful of her mother's injuries, while Liam held her hand, his face a mask of relief. "Mom," Leia cried, hugging her carefully, her small body trembling against Evelyn's. "You're awake." Evelyn could barely breathe, but she managed a weak smile anyway, her heart overflowing with emotion. "Hey, baby," she whispered, her voice thick with tears. "Hey, sweetheart." Liam's eyes were red and swollen, his voice shaky as he spoke. "We thought you'd never wake up." "I'm here now," she whispered, brushing his hair back from his forehead. "I'm right here." They clung to her for a long time, the kind of hug that makes up for weeks of fear, uncertainty, and silence. But when they finally pulled back, Evelyn saw something in their faces, a shadow lurking beneath the surface. Something heavy, something troubling. Fear, confusion, hurt. "What's wrong?" she asked softly, her voice filled with concern. The twins looked at each other, their eyes filled with a shared understanding. Then Leia's eyes filled with tears again, threatening to spill over. "It's Dad," she said, her voice barely audible. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat, her heart pounding in her chest. "Your father. He married someone else," Liam said quietly, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. For a moment, she thought she'd misheard, that her mind was playing tricks on her. "What?" Leia nodded, her tears finally overflowing and streaming down her face. "We saw it. He was wearing a tuxedo. She was wearing a white dress. Everyone was watching." Her hands went cold, her fingers numb. "Who?" "Her name's Clara," Liam said, his voice still quiet. "She told everyone you were dead." Evelyn stared at them, every word cutting deeper than any knife, each syllable a fresh wound. "He told people I was dead." The twins nodded, their faces somber. "And you were there?" Leia's lip quivered, and she began to sob again. "We tried to stop it. We told everyone you were in the hospital. They didn't believe us. The lady, Clara, she said we were lying. Then she told men to throw us out." Evelyn covered her mouth with her hand, her body trembling uncontrollably. "Dad didn't do anything," Liam whispered, his voice filled with a mixture of anger and disappointment. "He just stood there." For a long moment, there was only the sound of the rain drumming against the glass, a mournful soundtrack to her shattered world. Her heart ached in a way that felt physical, sharp, deep, and merciless. Richard, the man she had built everything with, the man she trusted with her life, the man who swore he loved her unconditionally. She closed her eyes, trying to block out the image of him standing at the altar with another woman. "He was at a wedding while I was in this bed." Neither of them answered, their silence confirming her worst fears. Evelyn opened her eyes again, forcing calm into her voice, trying to protect her children from the full weight of her pain. "It's okay," she said, her voice strained but reassuring. You're safe now. We'll talk about this later. But inside, something dark and cold was spreading through her chest, a chilling premonition of what was to come. That evening, her sister Martha arrived, her red hair tucked under a rain hood, her face drawn with exhaustion. The minute she walked in, Evelyn recognized the look in her eyes. It was the look people give you when they don't know how to say something terrible, the look of impending doom. "Oh, Evie," Martha sighed, rushing to her side and taking her hand. "You look better. I can't believe you're finally awake." Evelyn gave a weak smile, trying to summon some semblance of strength. "What's going on, Martha? Tell me." Martha hesitated, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for the right words. "You should rest." "I've been resting for months, Martha. Talk." Martha exhaled deeply, sat down heavily in the chair beside the bed, and took her sister's hand, her grip firm and reassuring. "Okay," she said, her voice grave. "I'm going to tell you everything." And she did, piece by piece, like dropping shards of glass into Evelyn's lap, each one cutting deeper than the last. Richard hadn't just walked away. He'd systematically wiped her out, erasing her from their shared life. He'd closed their joint accounts, sold her car, and transferred the house into his own name, leaving her with nothing. Then he moved into Clara Whitmore's mansion, Martha explained, her voice laced with disbelief. "Her father owns Whitmore Holdings. Old money, connections everywhere. Richard's been showing up at events with her for months, acting like they're the perfect couple. They said you didn't make it after the crash, that he was heartbroken." Evelyn stared blankly at the wall, her mind struggling to process the enormity of his betrayal. "Heartbroken?" she repeated softly, the word tasting like ash in her mouth. Martha's voice cracked, her eyes filled with tears. "Evie, I tried to fight it. I talked to the bank, I tried to reason with them. They said everything was signed legally, that they had your signatures on the papers." Evelyn frowned, her brow furrowed in confusion. "That's impossible. I would never." "I know," Martha said quickly, squeezing her hand. "That's why I think someone forged it." Evelyn's mind spun, trying to grasp the implications. "So what's left? The house? My savings? Everything I've worked for?" Martha's silence was answer enough, the unspoken truth hanging heavy in the air between them. Finally, Evelyn whispered, her voice barely audible. "He took everything." "Yes," Martha confirmed, her voice filled with sorrow. Evelyn leaned back against the pillow, staring at the ceiling. For years, she had been the one who believed in him, encouraged him, and helped him build his business from absolutely nothing. She'd skipped vacations, missed sleep, and even sold her jewelry to help him make payroll once. And while she was lying there, broken and helpless in a hospital bed, he'd taken everything they'd built together and handed it over to the woman who helped destroy her. Martha wiped her eyes, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry, Evie. I wanted to tell you when you woke up, but I just didn't know how." Evelyn didn't cry. She didn't scream or yell. She just went completely still, like something deep inside her had cracked, but hadn't quite shattered into a million pieces. After what felt like an eternity, she said quietly, "Where are the kids staying?" "With me," Martha said reassuringly. "You'll come home when you're strong enough." Evelyn nodded faintly. "Good." Martha hesitated for a moment, then asked tentatively, "What are you going to do?" Evelyn's eyes drifted toward the window. The rain had finally stopped. The clouds were slowly clearing, revealing a pale sliver of the moon. "What I should have done a long time ago," she said softly, almost to herself. "Get back up." Later that night, when the lights were dim and the twins were fast asleep on the couch beside her bed, Evelyn stared at the ceiling once more. Her body ached with pain, her heart was raw with betrayal, but her mind was wide awake, sharper than it had been in years. She replayed the argument she and Richard had before the accident, every word, every nuance. Richard's face, his voice, his cruel words echoing in her head. "You're holding me back, Evie. I can't build something bigger if you keep dragging me down with your doubts." And then, Just hours later, the rain-slicked road. The brakes that didn't respond when she slammed on them. The world spinning out of control. The sickening crash. Her hands tightened around the blanket in a white-knuckled grip. Brakes don't just fail like that, she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible. For the first time, the thought, chilling and undeniable, crossed her mind. And it didn't leave. What if it wasn't an accident? The next morning, a nurse came in carrying a large envelope. "This came for you, Mrs. Hale," she said, her tone neutral. "No return address." Evelyn frowned, her brow furrowing in confusion. "Who sent it?" "Don't know. A courier dropped it off." The nurse placed it on the bedside table and left the room. Evelyn stared at the envelope for a long moment, her heart pounding in her chest, before finally tearing it open. Inside were photographs, glossy and professional. Clearly, they'd been taken by someone hired for discretion. At first, she didn't understand what she was seeing. In the first photo, Richard and Clara were sitting at a hotel bar, laughing intimately, their heads close together, his hand resting possessively on hers. The timestamp in the corner of the photo read 2 weeks before her accident. In another, they were at a fancy restaurant, Clara wearing the same expensive bracelet she had worn at the wedding. And then, the last photo stopped Evelyn's breath in her throat. It showed Richard sitting at a desk, signing a document. Above his hand, her signature was already inked at the bottom of the page. She leaned closer, her eyes straining to make sense of it. It was her name, but she had never seen that document before in her life. Her vision blurred with tears and rage. He hadn't just betrayed her emotionally and broken her heart. He'd stolen from her, planned it all meticulously, and forged her signature to completely erase her from their lives. Her hands shook uncontrollably as she flipped the photo over. On the back, written in neat, precise handwriting, was a single sentence. "He started lying long before you crashed." No name, no address, just that one devastating sentence. Evelyn sat there for what felt like an eternity. The photos spread across her lap like pieces of damning evidence in a courtroom trial. Then she whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief and pain. "I wasn't supposed to wake up, was I?" The truth settled in her chest like a burning fire, consuming her from the inside out. She wasn't just a victim of bad luck or a tragic accident. She was a target. And whoever had sent these photos knew everything. The whole twisted, horrifying story. That night, she could barely sleep a wink. Every sound in the hospital seemed amplified, grating on her already frayed nerves. The incessant ticking of the clock on the wall, the distant crackle of the intercom, even her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. When morning finally came, she insisted on being discharged early. The doctor protested, his voice laced with concern. "You're not strong enough yet, Mrs. Hale. You need more rest." "I'll recover faster at home," she said flatly, her voice leaving no room for argument. He hesitated for a moment, clearly unconvinced, but eventually, he relented and signed the discharge papers. By noon, she was sitting in Martha's car, clutching the manila envelope tightly against her chest, as if it were a lifeline. Outside the window, the city rolled by in a blur of gray. Streets, buildings, billboards, all obscured by the rain. But she wasn't seeing any of it. She was seeing Richard's face, smiling, lying, destroying everything she had ever loved. She whispered, her voice barely audible above the drumming of the rain. "You thought I'd stay down, but I'm not down anymore." The ride home was silent, heavy with unspoken grief and rage. Rain streaked across the car windows, and the city outside looked like a painting smudged by tears. Martha drove, glancing at her sister now and then, her face etched with worry, but she didn't speak. There were simply no words to adequately express the depth of what had been done. Evelyn sat in the passenger seat, pale and utterly exhausted, the manila envelope resting heavily in her lap. Every few minutes, she reached out and touched it, as if to reassure herself that it was real, that the undeniable proof of Richard's betrayal wasn't just some horrible nightmare that she would eventually wake up from. When they finally reached Martha's house, the twins came running out from the porch, their faces lighting up with joy the moment they saw her. Leia shouted, "Mom!" and threw her arms around Evelyn's waist before she had even stepped inside the house. Evelyn hugged both of them tightly, burying her face in their hair, inhaling the familiar scent of warmth and innocence. It grounded her, pulled her back from the brink of utter despair. "I missed you both so much," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Liam's small voice came muffled against her shoulder. "Are we going home soon?" She hesitated, the question hanging in the air like a dark cloud. Home. The word hit her like a physical blow, a painful reminder of everything she had lost. "Not yet," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "We'll stay with Aunt Martha for a little while." "Okay?" They nodded, their faces trusting, but she could see the unspoken question lingering in their eyes. "Why can't we go home?" She couldn't bring herself to answer it. Not yet. Not yet. Inside, Martha had thoughtfully prepared the guest room. Clean, crisp sheets, soft, welcoming lighting, and the calming scent of chamomile emanating from a diffuser in the corner. Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed, taking in the quiet stillness of the room. The walls were covered in family photos. Summer trips, birthday parties, cherished memories from a world that already felt distant and unattainable. Martha lingered at the door, her expression full of concern. "I'll get you some soup," she said softly. "Thank you," Evelyn murmured, her voice flat. When her sister had left the room, Evelyn reached for the envelope again. She spread the photographs out on the nightstand, one by one. Richard's smile in every shot looked the same. Confident, calculated, and utterly fake. Clara's gaze was always fixed on him, not with the adoring look of a woman in love, but with the cold, calculating stare of a woman in complete control. Evelyn's stomach churned with disgust. She picked up the photo of Richard forging her signature and stared at it intently, her vision blurring with tears of rage and betrayal. Her whisper broke the silence of the room. "You tried to erase me." She didn't cry, she couldn't. It was past tears now. Later that evening, after the twins had finally fallen asleep, Evelyn wandered quietly through the small house, her steps almost silent. The sound of the rain had faded away, leaving the night still and heavy with unspoken tension. She found herself standing in front of a wooden cabinet in the hallway, an old, antique piece of furniture that had once belonged to their mother. Martha had inherited it after their mother's passing years ago. Evelyn ran her fingers along the intricately carved edges, a wave of nostalgia washing over her. "Mom would have known what to do," she said softly, her voice filled with a mixture of longing and despair. Almost without thinking, she opened the top drawer of the cabinet and froze. Inside, carefully wrapped in yellowed tissue paper, was a small envelope addressed in their mother's distinctive handwriting. To Evelyn, her hands trembled as she carefully picked it up. The paper was brittle with age. The ink had faded slightly over time. She unfolded it carefully, her heart pounding in her chest, and began to read. "My dearest Evie, if you ever find yourself hurt by Richard, don't let pride keep you silent. There are things I've kept hidden from you because I feared you would be too kind to see the truth. Go to room 204 at Whitmore Holdings. You'll find what he's built on your back and what he's hiding behind your name. With all my love, Mom." Evelyn stared at the letter, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her mother had written this before she died. The letter wasn't just a warning. It was undeniable proof that her mother had known something was amiss all along. "Whitmore Holdings," Evelyn whispered, her voice barely audible. "Clara's family company." She felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. How could her mother have known about them, about Clara? But then, she remembered that her mother had always been skeptical of Richard. "He's ambitious, Evie," she used to say, her voice tinged with concern. "Too ambitious. A man like that loves power more than people." Evelyn had always brushed it off, dismissing it as her mother being overly protective. She had naively believed that love could change him, that she could be enough for him. Now she knew better. Martha found her a few minutes later, sitting on the floor with the letter clutched tightly in her lap, her face pale and stricken. "What's that?" she asked gently. Evelyn handed the letter to her silently. Martha read it, her eyes widening in disbelief as she took in the words. She wrote this? When? I don't know, Evelyn said softly. But she knew about him, about all of it. Martha sat down beside her, her face etched with worry. What are you thinking? I'm thinking, Evelyn said slowly, her voice gaining strength with each word, that if Mom told me to go to room 204, I need to see what's there. I need to know the truth. Martha frowned, her brow furrowing with concern. Evie, you just got out of the hospital. This is crazy. You can't face those people alone. Evelyn looked up at her, her voice calm but steely, her eyes filled with a newfound resolve. I faced worse alone. Martha hesitated for a moment, her heart aching for her sister. Then I'm going with you, she said firmly. Evelyn gave her a tired smile. No, you need to stay here with the twins. They need you. Martha shook her head emphatically. You think I'm going to let you walk into Whitmore's building alone after what they've done to you? Not a chance. Evelyn sighed, knowing that arguing with Martha was futile. Martha? No, her sister interrupted, her tone softening slightly. I can't protect you from everything, but I can stand beside you. I can be there for you. Evelyn looked at her for a long moment, her eyes searching her sister's face for any sign of hesitation. Finding none, she finally nodded. Okay. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She lay awake in the darkness, listening to the twins breathing softly in the next room, her mind spinning with fragmented images and thoughts. The crash, the letter, the photographs, Clara's calculating smile at the wedding. It was all connected, woven together in a sinister web of lies and deceit. Somehow it had to be. Every part of her wanted to storm into that building right now, demand answers, and make them pay for what they had done. But she was still too weak, too tired, and she desperately needed a plan. So she waited. And while she waited, she remembered. Flashback. It was a cold night months before the accident. Evelyn had been waiting up for Richard, her patience wearing thin. The house smelled faintly of burnt coffee and the lingering scent of rain. When he finally walked in, his shirt smelled faintly of an expensive perfume she didn't recognize. You're late, she said quietly, trying to keep her voice neutral. Business dinner, he muttered, setting his briefcase down heavily on the floor. At midnight, she challenged, her voice rising slightly. He glared at her, his eyes hardening. Do you have to question everything I do? Can't you just trust me for once? I have to question it when my husband lies to me. She shot back, her voice trembling with suppressed anger. Richard's jaw tightened, his face contorting with a mixture of anger and resentment. You think I'm cheating on you after everything I've done for this family? After all the sacrifices I've made? She laughed bitterly, the sound hollow and devoid of joy. You mean everything I helped you do? The company you started in my father's garage? The one I helped finance with my savings? Don't act like you did this all on your own, Richard. He stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. Don't throw that in my face, Evelyn. You act like you're the only one who's made sacrifices. I'm not, she said, her voice laced with sarcasm. I'm reminding you who stood beside you, believed in you, and supported you before you started pretending you were someone else, before you met Clara. He stared at her for a long moment, his eyes filled with a coldness she had never seen before. Then, he said quietly, almost to himself, maybe I don't want to be reminded. The words hit her like a physical slap, sending a shock of pain through her. He grabbed his coat again, his movements jerky and agitated. I'm going out. Don't wait up. The door slammed shut behind him, the sound echoing through the silent house. That was the night she first smelled fear, not of losing him, but of what he was becoming. Back in the present, Evelyn sat up in bed, the memory burning behind her eyes, as vivid and painful as if it had just happened. The road to that accident had started long before the crash, long before the brakes failed on that rain-slicked road. And now, for the first time, she could see it clearly, every twist and turn, every lie and betrayal. The next morning, she stood in front of the mirror, tying her hair back into a tight, severe bun. Her reflection was pale and drawn, but her eyes were filled with a fierce determination. Martha appeared behind her, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. "You sure you're ready for this?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. Evelyn took a sip of the coffee, the warmth spreading through her, and nodded. "I'm done being afraid. I'm done being a victim." Martha gave her a small, hesitant smile. "That's the Evie I remember. The one who always fought for what she believed in." Evelyn picked up the envelope of photos and the letter from her mother, tucking them safely into her purse. As she turned to leave, Martha asked quietly, "What are you hoping to find in that room, Evie? What are you looking for?" Evelyn paused at the doorway, her hand resting on the frame. "The truth," she said, her voice resolute. "And if I can't find that, answer's good enough to destroy the lies." They left the house before sunrise, the sky still dark and heavy with clouds. The streets were slick and quiet, the city slowly waking up from its slumber. The Whitmore Holdings building towered above the skyline, a monument to wealth and power. Glass and steel gleamed in the faint morning light. Evelyn stared up at it through the windshield, her heart pounding in her chest. The logo glittered on the front doors, a golden W inside a crown. The same company that had funded her husband's meteoric rise. The same company Clara Whitmore ruled from behind her perfect smile. Martha parked the car a block away from the building, her knuckles white as she gripped the steering wheel. "You sure about this, Evie? There's still time to turn back." Evelyn nodded, her jaw set with determination. "Room 204. Whatever's there, I need to see it. I need to know." She opened the car door, her hands trembling slightly, but her resolve unwavering. As she stepped out onto the sidewalk, the wind tugged at her hair, whipping it across her face. She straightened her coat, squared her shoulders, and took a deep breath. "Behind her," Martha said quietly. "You look just like Mom right now. That same look in your eyes, ready to take on the world." Evelyn smiled faintly, a ghost of a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Good." She took one last breath and started walking toward the imposing building, her footsteps echoing in the pre-dawn stillness. Inside, the lobby was sleek and cold, a testament to modern opulence. Marble floors, silver accents, and walls lined with framed photographs of Clara and her father at various charity events, their smiles plastered on their faces. Evelyn walked purposefully up to the front desk, her heart pounding in her chest. The receptionist, a young woman with perfectly coiffed hair and a practiced smile, looked up politely. "Good morning. How can I help you?" Evelyn forced herself to maintain a calm, steady tone. "I'm here to see someone in room 204. The woman glanced at her computer screen, her smile unwavering. "Do you have an appointment, ma'am?" "No." The receptionist's smile tightened imperceptibly, a subtle shift that betrayed her annoyance. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but access to that floor is restricted to Whitmore executives. I can't just let anyone up there." Evelyn leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to a low, insistent tone. "Tell them Evelyn Hale is here. Tell them I need to see them. They'll want to see me, I assure you." The woman hesitated for a moment, clearly unsure of what to do. She picked up the phone, her fingers trembling slightly, and spoke quietly into the receiver. Evelyn couldn't hear the words, but she saw the color drain from the receptionist's face as she listened. The woman hung up the phone slowly and looked at her, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and apprehension. "Someone will meet you shortly, Mrs. Hale." Evelyn nodded, her expression unreadable. She didn't know what she would find behind that door, what secrets were hidden within those walls, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. It wouldn't be forgiveness. The camera would close in here on Evelyn's trembling hand, gripping her mother's letter tightly, her eyes sharp with purpose. "Room 204, she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Let's see what secrets you've been hiding." The elevator doors slid open with a soft whoosh. She stepped inside, her heart pounding in her chest. The elevator hummed quietly as it climbed, the digital floor numbers flickering upward like a countdown to danger. Evelyn's reflection in the mirrored walls barely looked like her own. Her once soft brown hair was pulled back into a neat, severe bun, emphasizing the sharp angles of her face. Her makeup was minimal, her face paler than she remembered it being. She wore a tailored gray blazer borrowed from Martha, giving her a sense of authority, and a visitor badge clipped neatly to her chest. Temporary staff, internal audit. The name on the badge wasn't hers. It read Emily Hart. Her heart thudded hard with each passing floor, a frantic drumbeat echoing the anxiety churning in her stomach. She'd memorized everything she needed to know. The layout of the floor, the entry codes, the times when the executive floor staff took their lunch breaks. But none of that really mattered now. Not really, because she was about to walk into the very place her mother had warned her about, the heart of the beast. Room 204. When the elevator chimed, signaling her arrival, she took a deep breath and stepped out into the hallway. The 20th floor of Whitmore Holdings was eerily silent, the air thick with a palpable tension. The air smelled of money and power, of expensive perfume, polished wood, and quiet fear. Rows of glass-walled offices lined the hallway, each one sleek and sterile, devoid of any personal touches. Framed photos of charity galas and award ceremonies hung on the walls, showcasing the Whitmore family's philanthropic endeavors. Clara's perfectly manicured smile was featured in almost every one of them, a constant reminder of the woman who had stolen everything from her. Evelyn walked past the receptionist, a bored-looking woman who barely glanced up from her phone. She kept her head down, making sure her ID badge was clearly visible, her pulse racing in her ears. Her steps were steady and deliberate, despite the turmoil raging inside her. Halfway down the hall, she stopped in front of a frosted glass door marked Archives, Room 204. The key card reader blinked red, a silent warning. Evelyn reached into her pocket and pulled out a stolen employee access card. Martha's friend at the bank, an old acquaintance who had heard about Evelyn's situation, had managed to get it for her, taking a huge risk. She prayed it would still work, that the codes hadn't been changed. She swiped the card through the reader. The light turned green. The door clicked open with a soft, almost mocking sound. The room was colder than the hallway, dim, windowless, and filled with rows of metal filing cabinets and locked drawers. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a harsh, unflattering glow. Evelyn closed the door behind her and locked it, shutting out the rest of the world. Her breath fogged slightly in the cold air, a visible manifestation of her anxiety. A faint hum emanated from the far end of the room, the sound of a computer terminal still on standby. She moved toward it, her senses on high alert, every sound amplified by her frayed nerves. Her fingers shook as she typed in the password, Hail! Hundreds of documents instantly appeared on the screen. Contracts, property transfers, legal agreements. Every single one of them had her name somewhere on it. Her stomach tightened into a knot as she clicked on the first file, the deed to their family home. Her own digital signature stared back at her from the screen, a chilling mockery of the life she had once known. The next file revealed a bank transfer of $180,000 from her joint account to a shell company, signed by both her and Richard. Except the her on that screen wasn't her. It was a meticulously crafted forgery. Her heart pounded in her chest, threatening to burst. She clicked on another folder, Whitmore Hale Partnership Agreement. She scrolled down the lengthy document, her eyes scanning the legal jargon, until they caught on something that made her stop breathing altogether. Clara Whitmore, Chief Financial Officer. Clara's signature was scrawled across every page, approving every transaction Richard had made, every fake transfer, every forged document. Evelyn's chest ached with a burning mix of anger and betrayal. She whispered to herself, her voice trembling with fury, You did this together. You planned all of this every step of the way. For a long moment, she just stood there, frozen in place, her hands gripping the edge of the desk so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Then, she spotted something else, a folder labeled Audio Archives. She clicked on it, her heart pounding in her chest. There were dozens of files, mostly routine meeting recordings and executive discussions. But one file, in particular, caught her eye. Private Richard C.L. Confidential. MP3. Her hand hovered over the mouse, her mind racing with conflicting emotions. Then, with a deep breath, she clicked. The audio crackled for a moment, then came alive, filling the room with the sound of voices. Clara's voice, sharp, smooth, and as cold as ice, filled the room. She's too good for you, Richard. Too pure, too naive. You'll never be the man she thinks you are. A pause hung in the air, thick with unspoken tension. Then, Richard's voice, tired and defensive. I loved her, Clara. I did. But she doesn't understand what I need. She wants a quiet, simple life. You want power? Clara cut in, her voice laced with disdain. You just don't want to admit it to yourself. Another pause, longer this time. Then, Clara's voice dropped, becoming a whisper like the rustling of ice. Let me handle her, Richard. I'll make her disappear, and you'll finally belong to me. Completely and utterly. Evelyn's knees almost gave out beneath her. She pressed a hand to her mouth, muffling a sound that was half sob, half scream of disbelief. The recording continued, Richard saying something in response, a nervous laugh, a weak protest. But Evelyn couldn't listen anymore. Her heart was hammering too loudly, drowning out the sound of her own thoughts. She clicked the mouse to stop the recording, her fingers trembling uncontrollably. Clara hadn't just known about Richard's infidelity and theft. She had orchestrated everything, manipulating him like a puppet on a string. The accident, the lies, the theft, it was all her, a meticulously planned and executed scheme. And Richard, the man she had once loved with all her heart, had let it happen, had allowed himself to be used as her pawn. She forced herself to focus, to regain control of her emotions. She couldn't break down here, not now, not yet. She started transferring copies of all the files onto a flash drive she had brought with her, her hands shaking, but her movements precise and efficient. As she waited for the transfer to complete, she noticed something strange. A folder at the very bottom of the list marked Vehicle Incidents. Her heart stopped for a moment, as if the world itself had ceased to exist. She opened it, her hand trembling so violently that she almost dropped the mouse. Inside was a single file labeled Subject, Evelyn Hale Incident Log. There it was, the truth she had been searching for, the answer to all her questions. The log of her accident. She clicked it open, her breath catching in her throat. The document was short, clinical, and devoid of any emotion. No remorse, no empathy, just cold, hard facts. Vehicle identified, Hale family sedan. Report, braking system failure. No police investigation requested. Internal note. Handled by security team are Mendes per se. Whitmore's instruction. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Mendes. She remembered the name. He was one of Clara's private security drivers, a hulking man who was always standing by her side at events. Evelyn's mouth went dry, her mind reeling with the implications. Clara hadn't just planned to take her husband. She had planned to take her life. Her chest heaved with the weight of the revelation. A mixture of anger, grief, and sheer terror. She tried to kill me, she whispered, the words sounding unreal even to her own ears. The truth felt surreal, but it was written there in black and white, archived, recorded, her attempted murder filed away like a routine business transaction. Evelyn grabbed the flash drive, her heart pounding in her throat. She had copied everything, every file, every recording, every piece of damning proof. She slammed the folder shut and started for the door, her mind racing with a desperate need to escape. But then, she heard the sound of footsteps echoing in the hallway outside, growing closer with each passing second. Voices. 2 women. You sure someone's in there? The door's locked. Yeah, the system log shows the archive room's active. Someone used an access card a few minutes ago. Her pulse spiked, a surge of adrenaline coursing through her veins. She looked frantically around the room, searching for an escape route, a way to avoid confrontation. But there was no other exit, only one narrow ventilation panel high above a filing cabinet. The voices came closer, clearer now, closer now. Evelyn quickly switched off the computer, plunging the room into near darkness, and ducked behind the filing cabinet, crouching low to the ground, trying to make herself as small and invisible as possible. The door clicked open, and a flood of light spilled into the room, momentarily blinding her. "Hello?" One of the women called, her voice hesitant. "Is anyone there?" Evelyn held her breath, her heart slamming against her ribs, afraid that even the slightest sound would betray her presence. A pause hung in the air, thick with tension. "Probably just one of the temps messing around again," the other voice said, sounding bored. "They're always pulling files. Just lock it back up." The door shut with a soft click, and the footsteps faded away, disappearing down the hallway. Evelyn stayed there for a few more seconds, barely daring to breathe, listening intently to make sure they were truly gone. When the hallway finally fell silent again, she slipped out of her hiding spot, her body trembling, her heart still racing. She checked her purse, her fingers fumbling with the zipper. The flash drive was there, safe and secure. Then, she quietly opened the door, her hand shaking on the knob, and cautiously stepped out into the hallway. She was halfway to the elevator when she heard laughter coming from down the corridor. A laugh she knew all too well, a laugh that sent a shiver down her spine. Clara Whitmore. Evelyn's blood went cold, every muscle in her body tensing. Instinctively, she ducked into a small alcove beside a large decorative plant, peering around the corner, her heart pounding in her chest. Clara was walking toward her office, her arm linked with a tall, broad-shouldered man in a navy suit. Her laughter was soft and dangerous, like the purr of a predator. "Oh, don't worry about Richard," she was saying, her voice low and seductive. "He's almost finished. Once he's completely ruined, I'll take his company, too. It's all part of the plan." The man chuckled, a deep, throaty sound. "Still playing games, Clara? You really enjoy this, don't you?" Clara smiled up at him, her eyes glinting with a cruel amusement. "You should know me by now, Adrian. I don't play games I can't win. And this is one I've been planning for a very long time." Evelyn's stomach twisted into a knot. Adrian, Clara's ex-fiancé, the man she had left at the altar when she began her affair with Richard. And now here she was, laughing, whispering sweet nothings, her hand resting possessively on another man's chest, while her new husband sat clueless, trapped in her carefully constructed web of lies. Richard wasn't her prize. He was simply her pawn, a means to an end. Evelyn watched as Clara leaned in and kissed him, a slow, confident kiss that spoke volumes. Then Clara said, almost lazily, "Richard's biggest mistake was thinking he could betray me and get away with it. He should have known better than to cross me." They disappeared into her office, the door closing silently behind them. Evelyn stood frozen in the hallway, her mind spinning, trying to process everything she had just seen and heard. Everything she had ever believed about her life, her marriage, her accident, even her supposed downfall, had been orchestrated by these two monsters, meticulously planned and ruthlessly executed. Her love, her home, her safety, her very sanity, all stolen from her. And now, after all this time, she finally had the proof she needed to expose them, to make them pay for what they had done. She exhaled shakily, the air escaping her lungs in a rush. "It's over, Clara," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's over." But the whisper wasn't born of fear anymore. It was a vow, a promise. Back in Martha's house that night, the air was heavy with silence, a palpable tension that hung in the air. Evelyn sat at the kitchen table, the flash drive plugged into her laptop, the screen glowing in the dim light. The twins were fast asleep in their beds, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in the next room. Martha sat across from her, watching in disbelief as Evelyn showed her the documents and recordings she had found. "Oh my God," Martha whispered, her voice trembling. "She did all this? She actually planned all of this?" "Yes," Evelyn said quietly, her voice flat and devoid of emotion. "She and Richard, they were in it together every step of the way." Martha's hand flew to her mouth as she read the security report, her eyes wide with horror. "Evie, the brakes. She ordered it. She tried to have you killed," Evelyn said flatly, her gaze fixed on the screen. Clara Whitmore tried to have me killed. Martha's voice trembled with a mixture of anger and fear. What are you going to do? What happens now? Evelyn looked up from the screen, her eyes steady and resolute. I'm going to burn them down. I'm going to make them pay for what they've done, and I'm not going to stop until they've lost everything. The next few days passed in a blur of intense planning and preparation. Evelyn contacted old friends and colleagues discreetly, people she knew she could trust, or at least those who owed her a favor. A lawyer she had once helped out of a tight spot, a journalist she had met at a charity event and struck up a friendship with. She didn't trust anyone completely, not anymore, but she knew enough about power and influence to know one thing. The truth means nothing unless it's seen, unless it's heard, unless it's believed. She gathered everything, meticulously compiling all the evidence she had collected. The recordings, the forged documents, the incident reports, the damning photographs. She organized them into folders, carefully labeled and dated. She wrote down the timeline of events, tracing the trajectory of their intertwined lives. Her marriage, Richard's company, the Whitmore partnership, the accident, the wedding. Then, finally, when she was ready, she opened her laptop's camera, the screen reflecting her image back at her. The face of a woman who had been erased, betrayed, and left for dead, but who had somehow managed to claw her way back from the brink, stronger and more determined than ever before. She pressed record, and the red light blinked on, a silent signal that the time for reckoning had finally arrived. Evelyn took a deep breath, steeled her resolve, and began to speak, her voice calm, low, and steady. My name is Evelyn Hale. If you're watching this, it means I've decided to tell the truth. The whole truth. Everything they tried to keep hidden. Her voice was calm, low, and steady. For years, I supported my husband, Richard Hale. Together, we built everything he owns. When he met Clara Whitmore, he didn't just betray me. He tried to destroy me. When I discovered what he was doing, what they were planning. Over the affair, we had some real knockdown, drag-out fights. Then, that night, around 52 minutes and 17 seconds, I got into a car wreck. My brakes just completely gave out. I almost bought the farm. She paused for a beat, her jawline tightening up. It wasn't just some accident. She then held up the photo of the report closer to the camera. Clara Whitmore actually ordered one of her goons on her security team to mess with my car. And I've got the proof right here. It's all in here. She reached for the next folder, pulling out some forged documents. These are contracts that were signed using my name, stolen, falsified, and then approved by Clara Whitmore herself. Richard Hale was her accomplice in all of this. Together, those two transferred all my assets, my home, and even my company shares around 52 minutes and 50 seconds, right into their own pockets. Her eyes remained steady, unwavering. I was supposed to kick the bucket that night, but I didn't. And now, I want the entire world to know exactly who these two really are. Her tone turned icy and hard. To Clara Whitmore, you built your whole damn empire on lies and blood. And to Richard Hale, you built your whole life on my back. Both of you wanted me completely erased from the picture. She leaned closer to the camera, her eyes piercing through the lens. Well, let's just see who's going to disappear first, shall we? And then she ended the recording. For what felt like an eternity, Evelyn just sat there, completely transfixed, staring at the laptop screen. Her hands were shaking like a leaf, but it wasn't from fear. It was pure adrenaline, that fire just pumping through her veins. Martha was standing right behind her, with tears streaming down her face. "Evie," she said softly, "you actually did it." Evelyn just nodded slowly. "Not just yet," she whispered. She quickly copied the video onto 3 different USB drives. Then, she jotted down addresses on a few envelopes. One for the Whitmore Holdings Board of Directors, one for Clara's own father, and one for a journalist that she really trusted. Each one got a flash drive and a printed summary of all her rock-solid evidence. By the time she sealed the last envelope, the morning sun, around 53 minutes and 57 seconds, was just starting to peek over the horizon. She walked over to the window, just watching the light slowly spill over all the rooftops, the first sunlight she'd felt in what seemed like forever as a free woman. Martha walked up to stand right beside her. So, what happens now? Evelyn smiled, the first real, genuine smile she'd managed since the night of the crash. Now, she said softly. Now we just wait for the truth to do what I can't. She turned away from the window, picking up the envelopes one by one. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. They took my entire life apart, piece by piece, she said. I'm around 54 minutes and 29 seconds just returning the favor. She slipped the envelopes into her bag, and before walking out the door, she glanced back at the photos of her precious children, sleeping peacefully on the couch. She gently touched the frame and whispered, "It's almost over." Then, she stepped outside, the sunlight hitting her face. Her car engine started, quiet and steady. The camera lingered on her hands as she carefully placed each letter into a mailbox, one by one. The sound of them sliding in was like the closing of a heavy door. When the last one, around 55 minutes and 1 second, finally fell, she exhaled deeply. A new kind of silence filled the air around her, not grief, not fear, but raw power. Evelyn looked straight ahead, her expression calm and cold. She whispered to herself, "You both wanted me erased. Well, let's see who disappears first." The city glittered that night, like it wanted to hide its sins beneath a thick layer of light. Every tower gleamed, and every street buzzed with activity. And right at the heart of it all, the Grand Region Hotel just pulsed like a living, breathing organism. Cameras flashed, luxury cars lined the streets, and reporters in sharp suits were everywhere. Inside, the ballroom looked even grander than before, around 55 minutes and 38 seconds, with chandeliers like miniature suns, gold runners, and crystal centerpieces. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a full-blown performance, a carefully orchestrated spectacle. Clara Whitmore had made sure that the entire city knew about it. She called this renewal ceremony a public display of unity after some unfortunate rumors had been swirling around. Every major news outlet was there, along with every investor and socialite who was just desperate for some juicy gossip. Right up front and center, smiling way too wide under all the bright spotlights, stood Richard Hale, a man who looked like he might throw up at any, around 56 minutes and 13 seconds, given moment. The violinist played softly, and the guests clinked their glasses together. The scent of roses and expensive perfume filled the air. Richard's tuxedo was absolutely perfect, and his hair was slicked back impeccably. His expression was carefully practiced, but anyone who was watching closely could see the undeniable tension in his eyes. He clearly hadn't been sleeping well, not since the first whisper started. He knew that something was coming. He could feel it like the pressure right before a big storm. Still, he just stood there beside Clara, pretending like everything was perfectly fine. The bride looked absolutely radiant in a white silk gown, her diamonds, around 56 minutes and 46 seconds, winking under the bright lights. Her smile was sharp, almost predatory. If Richard was scared to death, Clara sure wasn't showing it. She had built her whole life on control, and tonight, she fully intended to prove that nothing and absolutely no one could ever touch her. As she gracefully walked through the crowd, people leaned in to compliment her, flatter her, and just fawn over her incredible success. She soaked up every single word like sunlight. When a reporter asked her how she and Richard had managed to survive such terrible rumors, she laughed lightly and said, "Well, truth always wins out in the end." Around 57 minutes and 20 seconds. And love, real, genuine love, never falters. She was good, way too good. Even Richard almost believed her for a second there. At the far end of the ballroom, practically unnoticed among the catering staff, Evelyn Hale adjusted the black cap on her head. Her uniform was simple. Black slacks, a plain white shirt, and an apron tied tight. She blended in perfectly with all the other servers. Her tray of champagne flutes held steady in her hands. Her hair was shorter now, and her makeup was subtle and understated. To anyone who just glanced her way, she was just another face in the crowd. But underneath that polite smile, her heart was as hard as steel. Every single detail, around 57 minutes and 57 seconds, of tonight had been meticulously planned out, every cable, every timing cue, every single file upload. She had been waiting for this moment, watching for it and building towards it, and now it was finally here. From her position near the back, she could see the stage very clearly. Richard and Clara were standing right beneath a massive screen that was showing their smiling faces in a never-ending loop. Her fingers brushed against the small remote in her pocket, no bigger than a car key. The voice memo she had recorded was already uploaded and ready to play. All it needed was just one press of that button. The around 58 minutes and 32 seconds ceremony began with pomp and circumstance. The host announced them as a couple that truly embodied power, perseverance, and unwavering love. Evelyn almost laughed right out loud. She vividly remembered when Richard used to say all those exact same words about her. The speeches then started. First, it was Clara's father, looking proud and completely self-satisfied. He talked about business growth, family legacy, and the incredible strength of forgiveness. Then, Clara took the microphone, her voice smooth and confident. "I know that some of you have heard some stories," she began, smiling sweetly. "But what truly matters the most is that, around 59 minutes and 6 seconds, love, true love, always survives the storm. Richard and I are living proof of that." There was polite applause and camera flashes, and Evelyn's hands clenched tightly on the tray. She'd seen people tell lies before, but Clara was a true artist. Every single gesture was calculated, the soft tilt of her head and the fake shimmer of tears when she mentioned healing from their loss. Clara looked straight at Richard as she said, "We've come through darkness together." Richard nodded mechanically, his eyes looking completely empty. He looked like a man who was walking a very narrow plank and, around 59 minutes and 39 seconds, just pretending that it was a dance floor. After all the speeches, the music shifted to a lighter tune, and the guests began to mingle again. The lights dimmed down slightly. Richard drifted towards the bar, pulling at his tie. One of the groomsmen clapped him on the shoulder. "Hey, smile, buddy. You look like you're at your own damn funeral." Richard forced a laugh. "Feels like it," he said. The man chuckled and then walked away. Richard reached for a glass of whiskey, his third one already, and just stared into it. He was thinking about all those emails that, around 1 hour and 10 seconds, had gone unanswered, all the strange messages that had started coming in, and the incredibly uneasy feeling that someone was constantly watching him. And somewhere, in a quiet corner of his mind, he was thinking about Evelyn. Her eyes, her voice. The last time he had seen her alive, he didn't believe in ghosts. But lately, he felt haunted anyway. "Darling?" Clara's voice cut right through his thoughts. He turned around. She stood right behind him, looking flawless as ever. She smiled, that perfectly manufactured, picture-perfect smile. "You're not drinking too much, are you?" "Around 1 hour and 42 seconds, just enough," he muttered under his breath. She leaned in close, her whisper sharp and piercing. "Tonight is very important. Don't you dare ruin it." He met her eyes directly. "What are you even worried about?" she said lightly. "The rumors, the press, people talking." She smirked confidently. "Let them talk. As long as they're watching me, I win." Then, she straightened up and called across the room, "Ladies and gentlemen, if I can have your attention for a moment, my husband would like to make, around 1 hour 1 minute and 10 seconds, a toast." Richard completely froze up. Clara took his arm, practically dragging him towards the microphone before he could even protest. The crowd applauded enthusiastically, and all the cameras turned towards them. Evelyn watched from the edge of the room, her pulse quickening in anticipation. This was it. This was the moment of truth. Richard took the mic, forcing a weak smile. "Thank you," he said hoarsely. I just want to say how incredibly grateful I am for everyone here, for our family, for forgiveness, and for second chances." Clara beamed beside him, holding his hand tightly for the cameras. He swallowed hard. "To my wonderful wife, Clara, for standing by me and, around 1 hour 1 minute and 47 seconds, for believing in me." He stopped right mid-sentence. His gaze had landed on something, or rather, on someone. A woman was standing near the back of the room, half hidden in the shadows. For just a split second, he thought he was seeing a ghost. Her eyes met his, calm, steady, and eerily familiar. He blinked rapidly, and the woman turned away, quickly slipping behind a pillar. His voice faltered. For believing that love can survive absolutely anything. Clara nudged him sharply with her elbow, still smiling sweetly for the cameras. Evelyn exhaled quietly, stepping back further into the darkness. She pulled the remote out of her pocket. Her thumb, around 1 hour 2 minutes and 24 seconds, hovered right over the button. All around her, the ballroom was just pulsing with noise and light, the fake laughter, the clinking glasses, and the hollow toast. She whispered, "Let's see who you really are." And then she pressed it. First, absolutely nothing happened. Then, the lights flickered for a brief second. A murmur rippled quickly through the crowd. The giant screens behind the stage started to glitch, flickering between images of the happy couple and static. Clara frowned. "What's going on here?" The sound system crackled loudly. Then, without any warning whatsoever, a voice filled the, around 1 hour 2 minutes and 57 seconds. Entire ballroom, calm, clear, and utterly unmistakable. "My name is Evelyn Hale." The music abruptly stopped. Every single head in the room turned towards the screens. Clara's face went as white as a ghost. "If you're watching this," Evelyn's recorded voice continued, "it means that I've finally decided to tell the truth, all of it." Richard completely froze in place. His glass slipped right out of his hand, shattering into a million pieces at his feet. On the screen, Evelyn appeared, sitting right at her kitchen table, with the flash drive on full display beside her. "For years, I supported my husband, Richard Hale. Together, we built, around 1 hour 3 minutes and 31 seconds, absolutely everything that he now owns. But when he met Clara Whitmore, he didn't just betray me. He tried to completely destroy me." Gasps filled the room. "The night of my accident, my brakes failed. But it wasn't random. Clara Whitmore ordered her security team to tamper with my car." Clara's father stood up abruptly from his table, his face as red as a beet, his voice booming, "Turn that thing off! Turn it off right now!" Staff members scrambled frantically, trying to find the source of the signal, but every screen, every projector, and every sound system was all locked into the feed. "You both wanted me," around 1 hour 4 minutes and 5 seconds, erased from the face of the earth. Evelyn's voice continued, calm and perfectly controlled. "You forged my name, you stole all my assets, and you left me for dead. But the truth never dies." People began to whisper in horror, and phones came out as reporters started recording everything. Clara rushed towards the control booth, shouting orders, "Shut it down! Cut the feed now!" But nothing seemed to stop it. On the screen, Evelyn held up all the signed documents, the photos, and the forged deeds. Then the audio recording began to play. It was Clara's voice, cold and sharp. "She's way too good for you. Around 1 hour 4 minutes and 40 seconds. Richard, I'll make her disappear, and then you'll finally belong to me." The room erupted in chaos. Guests gasped in shock, and some even stood up. Others slowly stepped away from the couple, whispering amongst themselves. Clara's father swayed on his feet, his hand gripping his chest tightly. His assistant rushed over to steady him, but he collapsed, hitting the floor hard. Panic broke out, cameras flashed, and reporters shouted questions. Richard backed away from the stage, his face completely drained of color. Clara turned towards him, her expression twisted with pure fury. "What did? Around 1 hour 5 minutes and 13 seconds, you do?" she hissed. He shook his head, trembling violently. I didn't do anything." She slapped him hard across the face, the sound echoing throughout the chaos. "You idiot!" she screamed. "You let her live." The crowd then parted as someone began walking forward from the shadows. A woman in a simple black dress, her hair swept back neatly, her face calm and pale under the golden light. Evelyn Hale. Gasps rippled through the room as she stepped into full view. "Impossible," someone whispered. "She's alive." Evelyn, around 1 hour 5 minutes and 46 seconds, kept walking until she stood just a few feet from the stage. Every camera in the room swung directly towards her. She looked directly at Clara, the bride who had once smiled while pretending that she was dead, and said softly, "Did you really think that I'd stay buried?" Clara's mouth fell wide open. Richard whispered her name, his voice cracking with emotion. "Evelyn." She looked directly at him, her expression unreadable. "Hello, Richard," she said quietly. "You look terrible." The chaos all around them faded into mere background noise, like the entire world had shrunk down to just the three, around 1 hour 6 minutes and 21 seconds of them. Clara stepped forward, trembling with rage. You don't belong here." Evelyn tilted her head slightly. "That's funny," she said. "I thought that this was my story." Richard tried to speak, but Evelyn cut him off. "You already said your vows. Twice?" The crowd murmured nervously, with phones still recording. The scandal was unfolding live right before the eyes of millions. Security hesitated, completely unsure of what they should do. No one wanted to be the one to drag out the woman whose face was on every screen, exposing a massive crime. Clara's breathing grew increasingly uneven. "Turn it off!" she screamed again. Around 1 hour 6 minutes and 56 seconds, but the video just kept looping endlessly. Evelyn's calm voice just kept repeating, "You both wanted me erased." Clara turned to Richard, her eyes wild with anger. "Do something." He looked at her, really looked at her, and something inside him just completely broke. "I already did enough," he said softly. Evelyn's eyes flicked towards him for just a fleeting second, and he saw something that almost looked like pity. Then it was gone. The guests began to move back, giving Evelyn some space. She took another step forward. Her voice was low, but everyone could hear it perfectly. "This is where it ends." The around 1 hour 7 minutes and 31 seconds, music had stopped altogether, and the air was thick with shock. Even the reporters were completely silent now, just waiting to see what would happen next. Clara's lip trembled, but she forced a shaky laugh. "You really think that you can ruin me with just a video?" Evelyn's mouth curved into a very faint smile. "Oh, Clara," she said, "that was just the invitation." Clara completely froze under the lights, her white gown now looking way too bright and way too cruel. All eyes were on her, the investors, the reporters, the board members, and especially on the woman she had tried so desperately to erase. Evelyn took another slow step forward. "You built your entire empire on lies." Around 1 hour 8 minutes and 6 seconds, she said, her voice steady and unwavering. "And tonight, it all burns." Clara laughed, a high, shaky, almost hysterical sound. "You have absolutely nothing left, Evelyn. No money, no name, no proof." Evelyn cut her off sharply. "I have proof, and I also have help from the crowd." A man then stepped out from the crowd, tall in a dark suit. Cameras flashed immediately. It was Adrian Cole, Clara's ex-fiancé. Clara's smile completely vanished from her face. "You?" Adrian's expression was icy cold. "You dumped me for him, and then you used my father's company to hide all your fraud. You should have known that I always keep my receipts." He turned to all the guests. "I helped Mrs. around 1 hour 8 minutes and 45 seconds. Hale deliver everything to the police and the press." Gasps erupted throughout the ballroom, and reporters shouted out questions. Evelyn handed a folder to the nearest officer who had just arrived with a small team, badges clearly visible. Inside were all the signatures, transfers, and the final damning evidence. She looked straight at Clara. "Richard transferred all of his remaining shares right into your name just last week. You thought it would make you safer." Clara blinked in confusion. "What are you even talking about?" Evelyn's tone was almost gentle. "It means that when the fraud is seized, you lose absolutely everything, not him." Around 1 hour 9 minutes and 22 seconds. The color completely drained from Clara's face. Then, she turned on Richard, completely wild with rage. "You did this to me." He backed away slowly. "Clara, I just did everything that you told me to do." She slapped him so hard that the sound cracked right through the entire hall. "You ruined me for her. You pathetic fool." She grabbed a champagne glass right off the table and hurled it at Evelyn's feet, splashing gold liquid across the marble floor. Evelyn didn't even flinch. She stepped even closer, completely calm amidst all the chaos. "You planned my death," she whispered. "I planned your ending." Around 1 hour 9 minutes and 57 seconds security swarmed the ballroom, and the officers approached, one speaking into his radio. "We have confirmed documentation of embezzlement, fraud, and attempted homicide." Cameras exploded in flashes, and guests pulled out their phones, broadcasting the entire spectacle live. Clara tried desperately to push past them, shouting, "My father will fix all of this. I'm Clara Whitmore." But her father was being carried out on a stretcher, pale and completely silent. Richard stumbled forward, reaching out for Evelyn. "Evelyn, please just listen to me. I never meant." She turned, around 1 hour 10 minutes and 31 seconds, to face him, her eyes sharp, her voice quiet. "You meant every single choice that you made. You just didn't think that you'd have to live with them." He sagged as 2 officers took his arms. "Richard Hale, you're under arrest for embezzlement and conspiracy." Clara screamed, fighting against the hands that grabbed her. "Don't you dare touch me." The officers held firm. "Clara Whitmore, you're under arrest for attempted murder and fraud." Her veil tore as she struggled violently. The cameras captured absolutely everything: the broken pearls, the ripped gown, and the end of her entire empire. Through it all, Evelyn, around 1 hour 11 minutes and 4 seconds, stood completely still, breathing slowly, and just watching the chaos unfold like some distant storm. For months, she had dreamed of this very moment, and now that it was finally here, she felt no real triumph, only a deep sense of release. Reporters shouted her name. "Mrs. Hale, how did you survive? What are you going to do now?" She turned towards them, her voice calm, almost weary. "You can bury a woman's name," she said, "but you can never bury her truth." Then, she simply walked away. Outside, rain had begun to fall. The sky, around 1 hour 11 minutes and 37 seconds, had split wide open, washing away the heat and all the noise from the long night. Evelyn stepped out into it, feeling the cold drops sliding down her face like a baptism. Martha was waiting right at the curb with the twins. Leah ran straight into her arms. "Mom, are you okay?" Evelyn hugged them tightly, kissing the tops of their heads. "I am now," she whispered. Liam looked past her at the flashing lights and the police cars. "Is it over?" She nodded. "Yes, it's finally over." Behind them, the hotel glowed like a burning crown. Sirens wailed, umbrellas popped open, and shouts faded underneath the heavy rain. Evelyn turned one more time, around 1 hour 12 minutes and 12 seconds, towards the entrance, watching as Richard and Clara were both loaded into separate police cars, their faces pale under the flashing blue lights. She didn't smile at their downfall because she didn't need to. She simply took her children's hands. "Let's go home," she said. They walked together through all the puddles, their reflections breaking and then rejoining with each and every step. Later that night, the house was quiet and peaceful. The twins slept curled up beside each other. Evelyn stood quietly by the window, watching the city lights flickering far off in the distance. Martha entered the room softly. "You did it," she, around 1 hour 12 minutes and 44 seconds, said. Evelyn shook her head slowly. "No," she replied. "The truth did." Martha gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "So what happens next?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "We live, we heal, we start again." She looked down at her hands, steady now, strong once again. "They thought that taking everything from me would completely break me," she said. "But they only showed me what I was truly capable of." Morning headlines flooded every single screen. Clara Whitmore arrested. $1 million fraud exposed live on air. Richard Hale faces embezzlement charges as wife returns from the dead. Around 1 hour 13 minutes and 22 seconds. Evelyn Hale, the woman that they just couldn't erase. The world had its spectacle, and Evelyn finally had her peace. She poured herself a cup of coffee, opened the window wide, and let the morning air flow in. Smelled clean, like rain and brand new beginnings. On the table lay the flash drive that had changed absolutely everything. She picked it up just one more time, just to feel its weight, and then tucked it away into a drawer. No more recordings, no more revenge, just life. Before leaving for the day, she paused for a moment in front of the mirror. The woman who was staring back wasn't the same woman who had cried, around 1 hour 13 minutes and 58 seconds, in a hospital bed or hid behind her own fear. This woman's eyes were clear and bright, her shoulders were straight, and her silence was incredibly powerful. She smiled not out of pride, but out of pure freedom. Real power, she whispered quietly, doesn't scream or shout. It simply waits, watches, and then strikes when the truth can no longer be denied. Then, she turned off the light and walked right out, the sound of her children's laughter following her all the way down the hall. Outside, the very last traces of the previous night's rain shimmered softly on the pavement, washing away all the glitter, all the around 1 hour 14 minutes and 29 seconds, lies and all the ghosts. And with each and every step that she took, Evelyn Hale felt lighter and lighter. The story that had begun with such deep betrayal had finally ended with the truth, and the truth finally belonged solely to her. Betrayal might build empires, but the truth is what dismantles them. Real power doesn't come from revenge. It comes from rising up when no one ever expects you to.